Hello everyone. Welcome to the latest webinar from the Unconditional Basic Income Europe network. So for the start, I would just like to say welcome to all of you viewers that are listening. And I would like that all of you can actually go into the chat function and you can just write in your names and where you're coming from, or let's say where you're living, like for example, the name of your city. This is a very good way for us to, in the network, to know like where the viewers are based. So the UBI network has been active now for several years. We started with the European Citizens Initiative in 2013, promoting basic income across Europe, and now we are doing a little bit a similar thing. And that's the main part of our agenda, is to promote basic income policies across Europe, to cooperate with other networks across the world, and to make basic income into a universal human right. So, and what you're listening now to is part of our basic income T webinars, which is also connected to the current problems with the corona pandemic. So we are using these moments and the current period in order to discuss ideas connected to basic income and connected to, let's say, social problems and economic problems and also health problems that are taking place around the world. And in this episode, we are going to discuss about ideas of a global basic income based on private, or let's say community-based basic income systems. So for the start, I would just like to introduce my guests for today. My first guest here, of course, I'll start here with the ladies. So my first guest here is Saraswati Subaraman. That is a product designer at Circles, where they are working with basic income and blockchain technology at the moment. She's based in Berlin. My second guest is Naila P. And she is a co-member of Seeds community, working with outreach and communication. And she is at the moment based in Sri Lanka. And my third guest is Mr. Brandon Vanetta, who is a co-founder and co-designer of Manna Base project that started promoting a global basic income some years ago. So welcome everybody, and let us start the discussion. So for the start, I would just like to ask my guests here, or attendees, if you actually ever heard about the idea of a basic income system based on cryptocurrencies. And you will soon be able to answer these questions in our poll that's going to come up. But just before that, I would actually like to announce that we also have a special campaign for a emergency basic income, and you can find more information about that in our chat. So let's see what the results could be here. In the meantime, so I would like to start asking all my guests. So can each one of you, let's say, take just 2-3 minutes and explain your projects and also how it's connected to basic income and how it could actually change the world in the future. I would actually like to start here with the ladies. So Saraswati, you can start with the discussion.
Sure. So hi everybody, my name is Saraswati. Yeah, and Circles is a currency that is uses blockchain technology to distribute a basic income in a decentralized way. So there's no bank or specific state that issues Circles, but it is a web app that, upon logging in, folks are given a basic income, which is essentially a complementary currency. And all folks are given circles upon entry and are regularly and unconditionally issued circles while they use the app. So upon onboarding, essentially. So yeah, in that sense, like Circles really borrows from basic income, but although its position as a complementary currency that exists outside of a nation is really unique. Outside of a bank is a unique one, though not necessarily unique to this group. So yeah, that's a little intro.
Thank you very much, Saraswati. And let's go then on to Naila.
Thanks, Vlad. So what I'm doing is I lead outreach and orientation for Seeds, for HIFA actually, which is the organization behind Seeds. And Seeds is nothing but a tool that is designed to empower the people that use it and regenerate the planet that we're all living on. The UBI aspect of that is actually not quite UBI, but more like universal earned income. And that's based on how much you put into it. You'll kind of continue to get a return on contribution, but we can get into that a little bit later. Seeds is a cryptocurrency, which obviously uses blockchain technology, and that is so that very much similar to the project that Saraswati mentioned. It's a way to decentralize that control away from any organization, any government, any power source, or any control source for that matter. So it's, I mean, this is the new wave, but I'll pass it on. So thank you very much.
Welcome. All right, Brandon, your turn now.
Yeah, just thanks everyone for listening in and learning on all this. It's very exciting and forward thinking, and thanks for having me and putting this on, Ledhen, and your team, the network you guys have built around basic income. Yeah, Manna was started a couple years ago, and essentially we see that the value creation could derive from humanity's values. And UBI is the distribution methodology to be accessible to all walks of life. So there's a lot of things humans have in common across all tongues and nations, and we feel that a good median of exchange should be accessible to all. And then if you look at the evolution of money, a lot of them just die out. Not to say that fiat doesn't have a place, but there's a lot of flaws in some of those monetary policies. And so yeah, just blockchain technology is the evolution of all of this that we see, and it's a tool. And then early on, we saw that there was a lot of negative energy going into the blockchain space, more on the speculation side of it as an investment mechanism. But it's far bigger than that, and the potential of it really could push humanity in the right direction. We've been running a pilot, have learned a ton of what not to do, and what we've learned a lot of things to improve the project too. And we're in a phase of pushing it forward. One problem that we really didn't realize was a massive problem was the unique identity challenge, and then also the data harvesting that is going on many of these platforms is a big problem that needs to definitely get addressed. And this technology has the potential to be a solution to those challenges. So, yeah.
Interesting. So since we've been speaking a little bit about blockchain and kind of this community-based system, I just have a small thought, like I would say, like, the thing is, the word blockchain is still very, it's in kind of subcultural term. And I would say, many people around the world, like even people who are educated, like journalists and, professors, many people, they do not know what blockchain is. So I'm just wondering, like, if all of you could explain a little bit to our listeners, like how, in this case, like, blockchain is functioning, but also how it can be used for basic income, if you speak about more technical implementation of the system.
I'd love to speak on that, if I might.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So I think blockchain and cryptocurrency, first of all, are unjustly intertwined. All cryptocurrencies on blockchain, not all blockchain is cryptocurrency. And I think that because there are these new technology words that a lot of people get scared and run away from them. But it's really, really super simple for anyone on here who's not familiar or like a little bit intimidated by it. It's just like a brick. A transaction is a brick, and then the next transaction is another brick, and you can't remove the bottom brick, or you can't remove anything without the whole thing crumbling down. It's just not possible. So it's just a way to make sure that every single thing is solid and immutable and unfraudable, so that it's completely transparent and clear based on a unique number for each transaction. Now, the way that that can be implemented for something like UBI is to ensure that each individual gets exactly what is allotted to that person for a given period of time, ideally to cover their basic needs. That's how I would describe it. But maybe one of you guys, Brendan or Saraswati, can pop in and add.
I have my simple explainer, but it's really nice to hear other folks. I mean,
Go ahead.
I was going to say, the way I explain blockchains is that it's blocks of data in a chain. And every block, it can't be erased, is like computer tested for validity, for truth. So it just is a transparent receipt of like any data. And prior to blockchains, banks were the holders of financial data, but it can be other kinds of data when we're dealing with blockchains. But yeah, prior to blockchains, banks were the holders of that financial data. That meant that they had, a single server that they owned that held all of your transactional receipts, which is an enormous power to have, actually. It also is a pretty vulnerable system in a certain sense to have a single server hold all your data. But blockchains took that and essentially had all your data stored across many servers, like globally. So now that data that single receipt is like on multiple different storage device, like storing devices. So yeah, but it's true that like blockchains and cryptocurrency are not mutually inclusive. So you can have different kinds of data that isn't financial, and yeah, that's my brief explainer. Brandon, what you got?
Yeah, it's an interesting to hear everyone's point of view. I think it's been a pretty toxic space overall. I think it's starting to flesh out some good, because it's the average person jumping in, you Google it and you see some pretty just red flags, but it's a distributed ledger, a single source of truth, and that's essentially what it is. And what Saraswati was saying is that, there's very few entities that could type in an accounting tool and print $3 trillion and have it be from one centralized location. From a UBI perspective, how we've used it as a tool, because it doesn't necessarily need to be on a blockchain or decentralized is the term throwing out. Look at more distributed systems, is the transparency in sending resource at a zero marginal cost. And that means that if there is an entity or some source distributing to people or all, like every human, it should be on a distributed system that could be verified. And then the other is that you can send resources across the globe, like information. Like we are streaming now from many different countries, but to send value to you guys or to you gals is very challenging and difficult. The internet is broken in that context, and that's what's exciting about this technology, is that we could send value across borders, and that really is an exciting next evolution of technology in the internet era, in my opinion.
Fascinating. Yeah, I mean, this is like, I mean, in many ways, like blockchain is part of, let's say, the upcoming globalization trend. If we speak about decentralization, if we speak about automatization, and also, of course, these topics are connected to basic income, because there are predicaments that many people are going to lose their jobs, in these processes. If you speak about industrial transformation and, let's say, the digitalization as well. So now I want to see results for our first poll questions. So let's see how it is with our users. Okay. Well, apparently, actually, I was expecting, to be honest, results to be much worse. Let's say that people are not so familiar with kind of digital-based basic income systems, but at least in our current public, there are some voices saying that they are familiar with at least some idea or initiative. So my next question here for all of you is, if you speak about the concept and the future of your projects, so what would be the main benefits of the systems that you're working with? So we speak, let's say, about poverty reduction or social inclusion, and also what would be the main obstacles for your projects? If you speak about, let's say, I would say visibility and knowledge. So, okay, let's start again with Saraswati.
I think that Circles is very experimental and is like a community-led initiative. We are at the point where we've basically gone into a beta and piloted in Berlin, and that was really exciting. And we did that on testnet, which is basically means that it's not on like the main blockchain network, so it's kind of like play money. Yeah, I mean, they're really tough questions in terms of poverty and social inclusion. A lot of so now there's this currency, and it's a currency that's equitably distributed. It's a currency that like any community can pick up, but it's a question of the community, who takes it, and there's a lot of agency given to folks when you're handed an alternative currency that's open-ended and not state enforced. So it's kind of an open question, and I think we at Circles are really curious to see how it's picked up, because we already have some peer-to-peer networks engaging and using it, and a lot of different communities that are very curious and excited. Yeah, I think and that kind of brings me to the challenges, which is that I think when dealing with basic income, it's really important to, what I'm really interested in is like basic income in a context wherein there are really deep systems of support. And so I'm really curious about Circles in a context, in a sort of commons oriented context, like we've been speaking with eco villages and with like small communities that are seeking a currency, who found a need for currency after having like redesigned society in certain ways for themselves. And yeah, and so I think it would have, like circles would have utility there. I think there's a lot of possibilities, but with our project, it's fairly open-ended what the next steps are, and how it integrates with the larger financial system, as well. Like there's a lot of ways it could go.
I'll jump in if that's okay. From our like pilots that we've done, is solving the unique identity problem in the digital era is really difficult. And I think getting that hurdle is going to be a big step for all these different projects, because there's so much creativity that can be unleashed. But there are some bad actors out there that try to manipulate or take over some of these networks that are trying to do good. And that's unfortunate, but that's the world we live in. And then, like she was saying, is utility. It's like, yeah, okay, you got this token, sweet. Like, what do you do with it? You need use cases for it. I find microtransactions exciting, where like value back likes or pay for page on books, streaming, sending content via streaming or value via streaming. I think that could be one of the first really that use cases that picks up, and then more real world utility will come into play. And then something that I find that I think is the next phase of all this is like you look at universal basic income and you look at what all humans have in common, and tokenizing time, I think could be a really interesting logic that comes out of this. That's something we are in discussions about. So yeah, that gets exciting because all of these have dependency on time, and you never question. You get in these debates of basic income, free money, whatever, but you don't question like, were you alive yesterday or the day before? You don't question that because I'm talking to y'all now. So if you have a tokenized day, I think that has a lot of value for a stable means of value exchange. So yeah, those are the challenges and things that I get quite excited about as we continue plugging away at this this challenge we're up against. And I love working together. I think collaborative efforts is the way to go, because there's two trajectories in my mind, one very dystopia trajectory and one utopias one, and I hope we can get to that utopia's future, but it's going to take a lot of effort from all of us to get to that point.
So I suppose I will jump in and about the way that Seeds is kind of approaching it. Seeds comes from an interesting place where the number one priority is to regenerate, and that's regenerate the planet, not heal the planet, not save the planet, but regrow everything. Regenerate the dignity that's been taken away from any person who's felt marginalized or forgotten or left behind by whomever, and regenerate an honest source of value exchange. And the way that it's approached is that the more you put in, the more you get out. If you build, a permaculture garden and you start exchanging goods with your neighbors, then that will become a regenerative behavior. And based on that, we kind of have it as like you plant seeds, or currencies called seeds, plant seeds, and that gets put away for like a month, like a savings account. And when you harvest them, that gets a multiplier based on your contribution score. So however much you contribute to growing the community, to participating in regenerative behavior, to whatever, then there's a lot of different criteria. Then the more you'll get back in that harvest. So it's not a basic income, because it's not everybody gets the same amount to cover their needs. It's however much you put in, you'll get back in passive income. And that can go up and down depending on what's going on. Now, in terms of, oh my goodness, I think Brandon, you mentioned a couple things and it jogged my memory on some stuff. In terms of micropayments, yes, absolutely. That is a super, super exciting thing, especially because I obviously operate in the world of content with outreach and orientation. So we are creating a whole system, or at least we're talking about it, whereby each piece of content that is created, whether that's a video, or whether that's an article, a podcast, whatever it may be, every time that it's viewed or every time it reaches somebody, it gets a tiny little micropayment, and that pays for whatever the content was. So even if it's like a high level production, video production with like directors and writers and, you know, props and whatever, it should ideally pay for itself. Otherwise, it's really not worth the value that was put into it. And then on the other side, you could have someone with a brilliant idea and it's pure raw content. It's someone talking from their heart and it's valuable. Then that value will generate itself through its reach. And each one of those tiny little micropayments, we're talking like a penny or less even.
Yeah.
But when you reach, you know, a few million people, that's a lot. And right now, that's how YouTube was set up. I mean, it was doing that originally, except that YouTube was taking all the money and giving the content creator just a little bit. But with a system that doesn't charge anything for transactions, you can give over that tiny little bit of value to the person who was creating it without having to charge anything. And that's just absolutely brilliant. I totally agree with you, Brennan. It's like it's a new wave of very, very exciting technology.
Yeah, if I don't mind, I would like to add, I love Seeds branding, by the way. I think that's brilliantly branded. I think it's amazing because it ties into the earth side of things and everything. So I really appreciate that branding of the project. And yeah, like it goes back to the data. We're talking data, and Saraswati was saying blockchains, any data storage, any type of data. And when you generate your data on the web, it goes to Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and then they resell that data for advertisement dollars. That's how they generate revenue. So they're just shoving ad crap down your throat that you don't really want to see. And yeah, that's the internet model right now, and it's broken. And I read a statistic like more than half of COVID Twitter activity is botnets. So that's where it was a big awakening for me of understanding, wow, these social networks are being manipulated for different political or some sort of agendas, because you can't quantify the impact that you get people to get anxiety or fear, all that. Like it's very difficult to quantify that impact. But yeah, so this is big problems we're up against, and these have to be the next steps to correct the challenges we're up against. I've come to the conclusion that if we don't, it's not going to be a good future for our kiddos, because like anxiety, depression is at a sky high for young kids with phones and the sources they're getting pushed into their screen time. So yeah, thank you for that, Nyla. I really appreciated hearing your perspective there.
And thank you all for very insightful comments when we speak about the technical parts, but also how the basic income itself could actually contribute to people globally. Now, before we go on to taking questions from our viewers, I would just like to put on the second poll question, which is regarding the usage of a digital based or virtual based basic income. So you can see the question and also the answering alternatives that can be chosen. So just to see how that's gonna, and now we can actually go to the questions from the public. So there is actually 2 questions at the moment. So for the start, and this is maybe something for let's say Saraswati to answer in the first place. So the question is basically if the blockchain technology could lead to, let's say, consumption, like very high levels of energy consumption, and which kind of impact it will have on climate. And the second question is basically if the blockchain technology, how to say, oh, excuse me, it's not technical. So the blockchain technology could actually, is it like very immune, let's say, to hacker attacks? Is it very safe if you speak about potential risk? So it's about climate and hacking regarding blockchain system in relation to your global basic income proposals.
You asked me to start, but I'm so curious about Neela's response. It seems like it's really connected, and it really depends. I guess I'll say it depends on, we're talking generally with blockchains. It depends on what chain. Some blockchains are more consumptive than others. Recently, we use XDAI, which we're using XDAI, which is the way that it's structured is far less consumptive. It's a proof of authority chain, I believe. So anyway, not to get too technical, but it is not alarmingly consumptive. Any consumption is not ideal. It's certainly not perfect. So that's something to consider, but no, it is not like but the blockchain technology has like evolved a bit beyond some of like the big scare, it seems the big scares around energy consumption, based off of the ways in which they now test. The thing that's consumptive is testing the validity of a transaction using computing power. And so there's different ways to do that. And they've been exploring less consumptive ways. In terms of hacking, it's a really complicated question. I think I might return to it. But there's, blockchains are notoriously not private. So like long story short, like hacking they're really secure in a number of ways, but there's still a lot of ways to maliciously attack a decentralized system. And blockchains, like I said, are blocks of data in a chain. That data is across multiple servers, all over the world. It's totally transparent. So like it doesn't necessarily mean that it's always obvious who's doing what. It depends on what you store on the blockchain, what data is on there. But yeah, but conversations around like privacy, I guess, a little different than hacking. A blockchain isn't super easy to hack, but it just depends on what you mean. So I'll hand it over. Yeah.
You cued Nyla in there. I could jump in. The energy consumption problem, that's a narrative that gets spewed out there by some of these different, like there's maximalists in this space, like, because it's their economic well-being is tied to one specific problem, and there's a lot of bashing on these different projects or protocols. We come from a very agnostic mindset of we don't care what the winner is. We just want to improve people's lives with the best technology and the best way forward. From the old ways of doing it, like servers, Google servers, all those are very energy inefficient as well. You get into old paper bills and mining of gold, all that is just far beyond, it's minute compared to where we're going with digitizing the ledger or money, and on a distributed So that I think is a moot point. I think there are some concerns with Bitcoin some of those days where they would just hike up the hash power. But I think that'll go away here shortly. And like Saraswati was saying, there are some very cutting edge ways to secure those ledgers without much consumption of energy at all. And then the fraud and that usually tends to be the entry point to like interacting with the blockchain itself. So like we had to challenge that where we had thousands of accounts get signed up for Manna Base. Just someone bought thousands of SIM cards to get verified, and that's a sort of fraud. But like she was saying, it's all publicly transparent, so you know what's going on. You see the value being moved around, and you can run logarithms to kind of understand what's going on. And I think it's actually a lot of fraud will be mitigated via the blockchain once there's more regulatory framework around them. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on that front.
So in terms of, let me just see. Oh yeah, environmentalism. So Seeds is on the Telos blockchain, which is a 3rd generation blockchain, and it is not very consumptive, if at all. I looked it up at one point because I'm a really strict environmentalist myself, and I was satisfied with the answer, but I can't remember the answer specifically right now. But I think a lot of people just assume that Bitcoin is the only one out there. There are hundreds of cryptocurrencies out there, and Bitcoin, yes, is on like, I think it's like 2,500 people have to confirm each transaction. So it is very energy consuming, but we're not all Bitcoin. That's the short and sweet of it. In terms of fraudulent activity, there are a lot of different ways that you can approach it. As Brendan mentioned, you can prevent people from getting in. The way that Seeds does it is there's kind of an extensive user journey, and in order to take advantage of various different aspects of the Seeds universe, you have to go through that journey. So if you don't, sign up a friend, then you don't get past a certain level. If you don't put like 10 cents to plant, then you don't go on to the next level. So like you can't take advantage of the UBI unless you've achieved a certain amount of points. Like it's very gamified. So, and if you are ever determined to do something that's degenerative or harmful for the environment, harming or harassing anyone else, then your reputation score will go to 0. And if it goes to 0, then you lose everything. But you can only do that if you're really, really doing negative behavior, or doing nothing. Like if you do absolutely nothing, then nothing will happen. So if you're a bot, it's just not going to work. It just won't. And we can get into the details of it if anyone is curious, but that's how we kind of mitigate fraudulent activity. You won't be able to engage with the system if you don't prove that A, you're a human, and B, you have positive intentions. So I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, I mean, these are actually, very important discussions because, the topic of basic income is also very much connected to, I'd say, individual development, human self-empowerment. It's also about integrity. For example, when we speak about basic income debate, one important part of the debate is that people should not be exposed to or forced to, let's say, submit a lot of paperwork to government workers, like employees at like social services. The whole idea is kind of the basic income and integrity goes hand in hand. And of course, this is why blockchain technology is very important if you speak about not only integrity, but also our digital and sovereign identities. And There is one more question actually from the public, and it's actually about, it's actually a little bit tricky one. So I will read it to you, but I think that you should be able to answer it quite simply anyway. So the question is basically, just to see, yeah, if the, I mean, there are basically a lot of scams with cryptocurrencies. So is there any cryptocurrency, I mean, in this case, if you speak about basic income, that's not based on the organizers, getting rich? So, so what would you say about that? So I was speaking about that kind of controversial questions.
Would you like to start there? I can go.
Go for it.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think from my point of view is like anyone that's willing to take a stab at trying to pull this sort of stuff off has, for the most part, their intentions are right and pure. They could be doing a lot more different things if they were just money hungry. The scams in crypto, the narratives have been so toxic. It's so unfortunate because there is just like a Ponzi type attitude of like, go buy Bitcoin and hold it. It's like the value of this technology is how it improves people's lives and how people use it. No technology that has moved forward or have lived on is just something that sits there and does nothing. I think that's just such a silly narrative that gets gotten caught on into the space. And as far as like people getting wealthy out of this, I hope some of these people that start off these projects do, because I know that they're gonna do more with that value that gets created for them to improve, because this isn't the end all solution. This is just the first step that we need to go. It's going to take a huge amount of capital and value to really take people's lives to the next level through this. This is just the first step. So I hope that some of y'all that are founders or starting this do create a lot of value for yourselves, because I pray that you put it forward into other good intentions, because the fight's not over after this gets implemented. The fight's just began. So yeah, that's my point of view on it. So
I can echo that. I studied universal basic income and I studied cryptocurrency and blockchain, but this is like my first experience actually working and living in it. And I've only been doing that for about a year. So I say what I'm about to say with that context. And I can't speak for other blockchain or cryptocurrency startups, but what I will say for Seeds, which is my experience, the core team has sacrificed an extraordinary amount to get this up and running, many of whom have spent their savings working on this, have spent, there are not earning anything to ensure that this gets to as many people in vulnerable positions as possible. We have fast-tracked a lot of our activity, especially during the coronavirus, to ensure that there are communities all across the world, in places like Guatemala, in Australia, in like rural Oklahoma. Like we've got kind of pockets of places all over the world where we're trying to get as much value as possible to the people who really need it where we can. And that has come with a lot of self-sacrifice. So the way that it works with the completely decentralized organization is we actually have to ask the community when we get paid. So we ask the community, like, this is how much we accumulated in salaries for the past 6 months. Is it okay if we pay ourselves? And the community can vote yes or vote no. So it's also really important for us to make sure that the community is really people with the right intentions. And so we're hoping to at least break even for ourselves, and people will kind of recuperate the value of the savings that we've put into it. But like anybody who has approached us and wants to work for X amount of high price bill, the answer is just no. You have to really want this. Otherwise it won't work. You have to want to help people. You have to want to help the planet. Those are like the two major criteria. And if you don't follow them, please find something else. So that's how we at Seeds are mitigating that. I hope that answers your question. I'm eager to hear what Saraswati has to say.
I just wanted to repeat the question, which is about the like kind of Ponzi scheme or like risky side of blockchain. Like, how do you trust that like a project? It sounds like the question is like, how do you trust a project or know whether or not a project is trustworthy?
Many cryptocurrencies are designed so the developers will make money if it's successful. Are there cryptocurrencies that promote basic income, which make no money for the developers?
Right. I see that there's like a reframing of that question, because I read that question, but that's not how I understood it, as a question of like risk, or like Ponzi schemes. Anyway, you know, like it's a really heavily moneyed system. It's true that like blockchains, like in the beginning, especially, people really were like pumping and dumping and making a big mess of things and really using it to just like remake a busted system in their favor. Yeah, exactly. So like, so there were a lot of Ponzi schemes. I think that I don't know, when it's really, I guess I would advise to really investigate a project and know whether it's for or not for profit. None of these, I don't think any of us are running an ICO. It's now like, is that true? No ICOs here, right? Yeah, and I think it became pretty unpopular and awkward in the space to do that following all of that drama. Yeah, I think it's definitely important to vet the integrity of the project. I think it's one way to do that is to just, you know, it's pretty easy to tell whether or not how they're raising money in terms of like, if it's, you know, asking for a ton of investment from you, then, you know, yeah, you might want to like pause on that, and give it really due consideration. None of these projects are going to be asking for that of you. I don't think.
But also, if you don't mind, if I can add to that, if anything is open source, if the information on how they create the money and how they distribute the money is fully transparent, then generally it's a project that generally that's a good sign.
Yeah, I have a little bit more to add on that, if that's okay. It takes money or capital to do this stuff. So it's not like you just have unlimited time or money to produce this stuff. It's been like Nyla was saying, like savings drained, like other career opportunities down the toilet, like to try to do this stuff. So there are like reputations on the line of just like, and I've questioned it like before we were on this, is like, if I knew how difficult this was back in the day, I don't know if I would have done it, because it's been so difficult to do. And a unique perspective on it is a lot of academia, UBI, I think, looks at it as like political driven, like from central banks. And it's a lot of these projects are just money drains. It's like, donate money or print money, just give it out and it drains. It's a money suck, I call it. I think with the logic that all of our projects are kind of sharing is, this is like an opportunity in UBI where there's actually like a potential of like a return and a sustainable means of creating this new economy. So yeah, I think it's important for people to understand that it takes capital, it takes time to do this stuff, and it doesn't come out of nowhere. So you got to get the incentives in check.
Right, and then just tiny thing too, like pay developers. I mean, paying developers, that's not backwards.
No,
It's
not
like,
at all.
it's legitimate work. Like, it's not about
Yeah.
not paying developers. It's about making sure you're not being scammed
Yep.
yourself. You know,
Yeah.
so yeah, like just to. I would encourage, like, if someone's saying we pay our developers, like that's like high five.
That's good. Yeah, like
It
you
is.
pay people. Yeah, exactly.
I also want to kind of highlight the irony of the question itself, because we're talking about a universal basic income, and the people who are working on this stuff should also get a universal basic income for the work that they've done.
Sure.
So like, you know, you should not worry about starving to death because you're trying to do right by creating something like this.
We've gotten criticized quite a bit for some of that. So that's a really great question. Thanks for whoever asked it. Thank you.
So thank you so much for your insights. So before I just hop in like to the last quick question, like I would just like to see some results from our second poll regarding usage of. Okay, good. So most of the answers were positive, like, so it's about thinking using digital basic income for buying goods and services. Okay, so just one last question, and that is about the size of the community. So if you think all about your projects, so what would you say, how many members should like your communities have in order to become, let's say, relevant for paying out basic income, like making a real difference on the ground, basically?
I think this question is terribly relative. For something like seeds, and again, I can only speak for seeds because I'm not familiar enough with many of the others. There are people who are already living out their entire basic needs within the seeds community. Franz, who is our lead ambassador, is just a superstar. He pays his rent in seeds. He goes to restaurants and pays for it in seeds. And he just basically, every single person that he meets, he's like, do you accept seeds? And if you don't, let me tell you why you should. And kind of onboards people onto the platform like that. And we've got so many, I think like 75 really incredible ambassadors, one of which is Vladan here in front of you, helping to do that in their local communities. So it's not necessarily a matter of quantity. It's a matter of just will, I think. So there might be like all of geographical Europe might be using it, but then, you know, you go to Japan and you can't use it there. So it really just, it has to, if you want it to work, then you got to get out there and make it work. And that's, it's as simple and as complicated as that.
Yeah, from our point of view and experience has been, we tried to ramp onboarding as fast and as quickly as possible, found out that's a bad idea with the unique problem. And then the other thing we learned was that the distribution, the dilution of the value, it just became so, especially from a startup, and that's not well capitalized at all. The value, and it just wasn't meaningful to the users. We were seeing that our theories were starting to hold true, but then again, it takes capital to make sure that you send value out. So we reevaluated. We partnered with a great project called Bright ID, and now we're going to do more focused, meaningful value. And then my hope is we actually can saturate a community with the actual free floating token to see what occurs there. But that's all going to take a lot of time. So
I can say for circles, we've been pretty cautious about approaching precarious communities. Like when you're dealing with something that's such a new technology, I really think that we want to like vet it many times over to ensure that it has promise. And so our approach was to actually like really deal with folks who could break it without losing anything themselves. And so that means particularly working with folks who are not in precarious situations, so that the technology can grow and develop enough to be a really stable possibility for folks to use it. I actually am not so gung-ho on global currency, incidentally. I think that there's I'm much more curious about local currency, and how a complementary currency and a particularly modeled after basic income can be high functioning and encourage local economy, and foster local economy and build really enrich peer-to-peer networks of circular exchange. So, reuse and used materials, really integrate with also some of the more progressive businesses that are local first. And so that's what we've been exploring in Berlin. And I think once we have a robust enough network that we have seen that sustain itself, and there's a lot of groundwork to lay. It's nice to hear that Seeds is doing some of that work. I think the ambassador structure is really sensible. Once you have that groundwork, and then I think it makes sense to approach, for example, a refugee community, or folks who might have a lot to gain, but also a lot to lose if things fail. So we've been really cautious. I think it's the I Ching says something along the lines of you got to plant your roots slowly, and feel your way through. So yeah, it's just one step at a time in that regard.
All right.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Yes. Oh, sorry, Nala. The thing is kind of, the clock is now, how say, clicking down, or going down. So so I really want to thank you, all of you, for participating today and sharing your ideas and presenting your projects. And I think it was a very wonderful discussion where we were able to connect different aspects like blockchain, climate change, and how to say, social aspects to the topic of, or integrity to the topic of basic income. So thank you very much, all of you. And now I just want to tell you who are in the audience, to our viewers and listeners, that the Zoom link will be open for 30 more minutes. So you're able to stay, you're able to mingle, you're able to discuss between yourselves, and not only, let's say, about this discussion, but you can also share your ideas for upcoming basic income T webinars. So please provide your proposals. And last but not least, I just want to inform all of you that this summer we're actually, as a network at the UBI, is organizing a summer academy, or the summer school. So, and if you really are interested in the basic income, as a secretary of this network, I'm encouraging you to take the chance and meet other members, because summertime is awesome for being outside, drinking ice cold drinks, and having meaningful discussions about basic income and the future of work. So for more information, just write your emails to contact@monkeyubie.org. So thank you very much, everybody, and yeah, keep it strong. So now we can continue discussing. Thank you.
Thank you, Gladden. Very well organized. Yeah, I didn't realize we're staying on for a bit. I can stay a little bit
absolutely.
longer.
You're so welcome. Okay.
Yes, thank you, Vlad, for organizing this.
Welcome. All right. So see you later in the future, so to say. Okay. Take care.
Yep.